How do everyone? Welcome back to Royville Reads. My name is Stefan. So I'm a big fan of Star Trek books. You can see I have a few of them over there. I have over like 120, maybe 140 Star Trek novels. You might think that's a lot, maybe you don't, I don't know. But there are over, I think, like 500 some Star Trek novels of the various series. So, and I've probably read, I would say maybe 20 of them, maybe 30 or 40 of them. So I'm trying to take a concerted effort before I buy more Star Trek books to kind of dive into what I have. So I picked up a quick read from my collection, and it is a Star Trek novel, Mutiny on the Enterprise. This is a very old book. It is written by Robert E. Vardaman. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it was published or copyrighted in 1983. So if memory serves, that is after Wrath of Khan, but before Voyage Home. So it doesn't say in the book when the story takes place. A lot of the later Star Trek novels will in the beginning have a historian's note that says when the story takes place in the overall, I guess, Pocket Universe Star Trek timeline. This was published by Pocket Books, and it was published under their Timescape imprint, which I don't think lasted too long. I think Timescape was a science fiction imprint by Pocket that did not last too long. But these are really the first Star Trek novels in existence. I don't know if they're the actual first, but I think they're one of the first grouping. Because you can see here, these are the other Timescape books, Star Trek, published by Pocket. And if you see a later book, let me see here. A later book will have, so this one was also written by Pocket years later. And you can see here, so there, these are all Star Trek novels, and the list goes on and on and on. And I'm trying to see if they actually have in here. Yeah, they don't separate you can see here, like, the numbering. So, like, number 1, these are a bunch of the Time series novels. So this book actually says that Mutiny on the Enterprise is listed as the 12th Star Trek novel. So that being said, was it any good? Well, I find it, first of all, funny here that if it is if it is published after the Wrath of Khan, why are they not in the red, like, military style uniforms? Also, if you look really close, they're not really even in the motion picture uniforms. They kind of are, but it was almost kind of like, hey, Kirk, Spock, just come in on an off day, just casual day, like work casual, just wear what you want. We need to make a picture of you for the cover of a new Star Trek book coming out. So yeah, I find it really, really odd. Also, if you look, it makes me think that the story is before any of the movies, because once again, the Enterprise in the background looks more like the TV show. But it does not say anywhere in the book when the story is set. That being said, the story is basically about the Enterprise trying to combat, well, not trying, returning to Starbase 1, and they need extensive repairs. They've been out doing some other adventures for a while, missions, other adventures for a while, and the Enterprise really needs a major overhaul. Well, there's something going on in the Orion arm of the galaxy that involves two planets that are going to go to war if they don't have these diplomats that come and try to help it out. But there's also Romulans, and we don't want that area to fall to the Romulans. So the only ship that can possibly do it is the Enterprise, which needs an extensive overhaul. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about if your crew is basically just sleepwalking through because they have been doing mission after mission. The only ship that can do this is you, Enterprise. You, Kirk. You gotta go. So they beam over some ambassadors. The main ambassador being Ambassador Zarv, Z-A-R-V, Zarv, who is a Tellarite, which, if you are interested or know anything about Star Trek alien lore, they're a pig-style people that are extremely abrasive pretty much all the time. And they're the main ambassador. But I guess he's a great diplomat, so they go, much to the crew and especially Captain Kirk's recommendation, they start traveling off to the Orion arm, where they meet a woman, an alien woman they rescue from a derelict spacecraft. We don't know what happened to the spacecraft, but they rescue this woman. They don't know her name, so they just start calling her, they're like, basically, like, we're going to call you Lorelei. And she was okay with it. So her name, I guess, was unpronounceable, and she was just basically called the speaker in her culture. So she gets this great idea that the Enterprise is actually going into a fight, and she's an extreme pacifist. So she starts talking to all the crew, thereby getting them on her side, and they don't want to do their job because they want to be pacifists too. As a reader, you can definitely tell what's going on, and the first part of the book was extremely frustrating because I'm sitting there going, you had this figured out in 20 minutes in a TV show episode, Kirk. Why aren't you figuring this out now? She is obviously some kind of empath or something, and she is taking over your crew. Seriously, do something about it. But also, he's dealing with the Enterprise being so dilapidated and run down from its repeated missions that nothing is working. Like, seriously, that was also kind of annoying. Because literally, like, this thing would be taken off the road if it went in for its, 10,000 service check. As much as they talk about everything. Like, they couldn't even have, like, life support on while using the transporters, basically, because it was so dilapidated. The engines, they could only go warp 1 for most of the time, thereby upsetting the ambassador, who's an abrasive Tellarite, so he's always yelling at everybody. The first part of this book was really hard to get through, and I was like, okay, it must just be a symptom of it being an old Star Trek book. But then they find out that, or they figure out with Scotty's help, that they can repair the warp engine so they can go faster, but they need a bunch of basically protective metal to work on the long pylon nacelle warp engine. So they find a planet that they think that they can get it from because there's a civilization there that they've never experienced before. So they beam down to the planet, find out that the planet is just one sentient ecosystem. I thought was a pretty cool idea. There's some things that go on there by hook or crook. They're able to get what they need. At this point, Lorelai and her mutiny is in full swing. So Kirk and some of his, like Spock, isn't affected because he's Spock. I don't know, whatever. He isn't affected by Lorelai because he's Spock. Bones is kind of affected. Kirk is affected, but his first love is the Enterprise, so he can fight through it more than most people. But yeah, so there's a kind of a escape from the planet. Lorelai is taking over the Enterprise. They're able to get the Galileo, get back. They fight through by stunning some of their crew. They're able to take back the Enterprise, and they travel on to the system with the 2 planets so that they can hopefully avoid the confrontation between the 2 planets, make a peaceful resolution, and also stave off a Romulan invasion of that area, thereby really pushing the Federation back in the Orion Arm. Not going to tell you the ending. I'm not sure if I agree with the ending because of everything else that happened. Let's just say we come to find out that Lorelai has the ability through talking and her emotions and her pheromones to persuade people. And Kirk had to fight against it, and he was really upset with her. He imprisoned her, and she was almost kind of like a drug on people's psyches. And they kept saying in the book that once you aren't around her, it's basically kind of like you're going through withdrawals, and you'll regret your actions if they were seen in your mind that would not be something you would normally do. So the way Kirk concludes the confrontation between the 2 warring factions, I don't know if I agree with. And I would, if you've read this book or if this inspires you to read this book, I would like to hear your thoughts. So leave them down in the comments if you agree with his solution to it. That being said, this is a pretty quick read. It took me a little bit longer to read it than normal. It's 189 pages. I think because probably the first part of the book was lagging so much for me, it took me a little bit longer to read it. But once they discovered the strange planet and all that, and then the conclusion with the 2 planets, it really picked up, and I really started to enjoy the read. I just really didn't think that Kirk would make the plan or conclude the mission the way he did. So, about the actual writing of the book, another reason it was hard for me on this book is because it seemed like in the beginning, Mr. Vorderman was having a hard time with the voices of the characters. They seemed just a little off to me. They would say things that I was like, I don't think Kirk or Spock or McCoy would say something like that. This coming from a lifelong Trekkie that has seen every episode of the original Trek, even the cartoon. I'm not an authority, but I have in my mind a certain way that I think those characters talk. But it was an early novel, so yeah. Um, Secondly, I found it really. So he does a thing which a lot of people do whenever, for example, Scotty is talking. He talks or is written in an authentic Scottish accent. And honestly, it is not good. Like, part of it, I mean, yes, sir, so that it would be written as A or SAIR instead of SIR, right? The way the writer does it, some of the words, I read the sentence like 3 times and I could not figure out what he was saying. So, yeah. That was kind of annoying. And also, I found it funny. Maybe they didn't have strong editors at the time, but there is an episode of the original Star Trek show called The Galileo 7. It's about a shuttlecraft that gets stranded on a planet, and 7 being because there were 7 crew members on it. So Galileo 7. The shuttle was called Galileo. Well, in here, in italics, because, when it's a name of like a ship, like Enterprise, it would be in italics. In here, Galileo is always referred to as Galileo 7, not Galileo. I thought, like, seriously, nobody caught that? Because it is multiple times that it is said. I just thought it was interesting, I guess, but also kind of in the back of my mind was like, really? Nobody said anything that it was. You're writing the name of an episode, right? Not the actual ship. It's just Galileo. Okay. But other than that, the grammar and everything, the book is pretty well written. I know that Vorderman did write a lot of other books. So he was a pretty prolific writer. Also, if you are more familiar with later Trek or modern Trek, a lot of the concepts in here, speed of the ship, what they call things, is a little less solid in here because they were still trying to kind of figure it out. This is more kind of a science fiction adventure with Star Trek. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. It is a Star Trek adventure through and through. But a lot of the concepts are very new, very not well defined in this time frame. So, like deflector screens instead of ray shields, that kind of thing. Equipment, the warp bottles kept breaking down. I just kept think of like glass Coca-Cola bottles were smacking against each other. The glass, Captain, the bottles have been keep smacking. The glass is going to break and the warp engines will go down. Yeah. So, that being said, I did enjoy this novel overall. I do recommend it. But just know there are some things that I kind of had a problem with. That being said, I don't know how many times. You should tell me down below if I've said that being said quite a bit. But I have a lot more Star Trek novels. If you are interested in knowing or me reading more of them and talking about them on this channel, let me know. There are a few that I really, really liked that I will be reviewing in the future. And maybe some new ones that I read that I will enjoy. But thank you, everybody, if you got this far. And yeah, keep reading. Thanks.